Alright, I'm clicking it now.
Yeah.
You all done, David?
Almost.
Oh, we're doing it anyway. I guess I'll bring the mouse with me.
Wireless. Whoa.
Shall I, this might be in the way. Hello, everyone. We're just getting started here, but if you aren't aware, if you haven't read the title, this is going to be a live stream with my friend Lambda.
Hi.
You can find a link to his channel in the description of this video where you do Bible studies.
Yeah, every week, every Saturday night, we do a Bible study on a chapter of the Bible. And sometimes midweek, we have exciting surprise streams.
And it was on one such surprise midweek stream that you were talking about the third commandment,
Yeah.
which is about taking the Lord's name in vain, but which my parents always interpreted to be a rule against swearing, which led you which I mentioned in the live chat, which led you to bring up some interesting points I'd never heard in the Bible about wholesome speech.
Yeah, well...
And also my husband's here, please.
So I think this is a common thing when parents don't want their children to do something, and then they find a Bible verse that seems to approximately say something similar to what they want their children not to do, and they just use it, misapply it. So I don't think that the third commandment is a good reason not to swear, but I do defend a pretty strong anti-swearing position, which I think is fairly countercultural. So, I basically think language is this super powerful, amazing thing that we should think more about. We should use for like the best purposes, and using speech to bring up topics like scatological language. Just generally polluting our minds by thinking about things that you wouldn't want to think about.
Bringing up vivid imagery.
Vivid imagery, yeah. It feels like almost intuitively correct to me that the world is better if we think about wholesome things. There's Bible verses, I can find some in a second, that back me up on this. But also I want to say, like, I think these principles also would apply. I can defend them more broadly than just people who are going from the Bible. Like, there's going to be people watching probably who are like, well, the Bible says all kinds of things, I don't care. I think the Bible says really useful stuff on this that is clearly wisdom we can all like listen to. So yeah, that's kind of my opening gambit.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to respect about that, and I would put forward I almost made it the thumbnail, but I was thinking of the classic sort of midwit meme that's so popular at the moment, or also known as the sort of exploding enlightening brain meme, where you've got the tiny brain going like, words are just words. The tiny brain stupid thing is like, your words are magic. Like in Harry Potter, like maybe you can like cast spells with your words, or if you say something, it'll make it true.
Yes.
And then the slightly more enlightened version of that is, words are just dumb, that you can't, they're not magic, they're just sounds that come out of your mouth. Shoot is an awful lot like shit, and like there's no difference between those two sounds, doesn't matter. Yeah. And then the most enlightened exploding brain.
Words magic.
Yeah, words are magic, basically.
I think that's true. And as well as being the IQ curves, I think you see the same thing as people mature. Like during one person's lifetime, you'll go through, as a child, you're told by your parents, don't say this stuff, and you just don't, because your parents told you, you just kind of follow what they told you. You reach, at school, I remember it was probably year 5 or 6 when people started, the most daring, rebellious children would occasionally drop a swear word and everyone would be shocked. By the time you're into high school, basically everybody's speaking this constant like explosion of foul.
Yeah, but probably not in front of teachers or their parents. It's something that children do in private, I think. It's
kind of, showing off to one another, but they know they might get in trouble with the authority figures. But everybody kind of has this perspective of like, oh, hang on a minute. The language is just a set of letters that somebody's made up at some point. So how can this possibly matter? So they're kind of relishing this freedom that they think they've discovered. But I think if people think a bit harder about it, they reach a level of maturity where they realise, hang on, if I use language insensitively, it means I'm robbed of the ability to articulate myself on subjects. So if I throw around extreme language about casual things, it means I can no longer properly explain, big things because I've lost that language.
Yeah.
I think the same thing is true about swear words. If you're constantly claiming that tiny things that happen in your life are the worst thing in the world, you're just kind of thrown into an abyss of meaninglessness and nothing because your attitude, because language is a tool, and I think it's a way we can, when you listen to other people talk, you see inside them almost, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way we have. It's like telepathy, where there's a very complex, or maybe not so complex, concept in my brain. I want to get it into your brain.
Right.
I could draw a picture, or I could write it down, but the easiest way to do it is just to speak out loud. And people can do it so easily that it's no effort at all just to open your mouth and to, extremely drunk people can speak.
Yeah.
Usually, it might come out a bit slurred, but it's almost harder to stop yourself speaking sometimes. And that's coming back to swearing. The act of the expletive language is often an exclamation where you must shout something.
Yes.
And I often find myself, I still don't swear in front of my parents, and they don't swear in front of me.
Okay, yeah.
So if I'm with my parents, or if I'm in a meeting at work or something, I'll go shoot. The shoot is my go-to, expletive.
Uh-huh.
Which
people swear at your work?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I was going to mention that actually because not everyone does, but it was quite a shock to me when I started being around adults who swore, because it always was something that I did with my peers that we wouldn't do in front of adults, and the adults never swore to us. But when I went into the working world, people are just swearing, like people who are the age of my dad, people who are older than that, and they're all swearing. And then some very old-fashioned guys will apologize. If I'm the only lady in the room, they'll apologize to me specifically.
Will they?
They go, "Oh, I
Interesting.
as if it's so much worse to swear in front of a lady."
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing about gender and workplace and whatever. But
that's your bread and butter, right?
it is, yeah. I can't remember what I was going to say there, but yeah, I'll
Well, so swearing is a very social thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to come to that, but go on.
Well, I try not to swear even in my head or even when I'm by myself, which is a really extreme, that. But that's maybe we can come back to that. But just talking in terms of a group dynamic, if you swear, you're picking language which has some cultural association with being shocking and rude, and even if it eventually loses its power, there's still that lingering sense that you're doing something to break a taboo. And I think doing it all the time does express, and people understand, the way that I'm talking is an expression of my discontent with society generally. I don't like maybe the history that I come from, which would refuse me this language. So I think it's interesting when you see groups which swear words they pick. That group is knitting themselves together by saying, we are against the people who are most offended by these words that we choose to use all the time.
Good point, yeah.
Like you'll see some circles using words frequently that you could identify just based on that what group they consider themselves to be most against.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about that.
List these words.
So we were talking about it just before the stream, there are words that were commonly in usage on TV and in movies and certainly on the playground that are now extremely unfashionable. And you still, it is odd how some people don't really get the memo. And I don't know if I need to be explicit about what kind of words I'm talking about, but sometimes someone at work will drop a mentally deficient word.
Right, yeah.
And there's a guy at work who has a mentally deficient daughter, and even that is not a PC way of saying that, actually, now that I come to say it.
You're inventing a whole new way to offend people.
Yeah, but anyway, he he would refer to these people as being very immature. I mean, not that he made a big deal out of it, but I think he was maybe telling me that I shouldn't say that. Not that I had or that I would, but I think you're right in that it's now. I do get a kind of glee out of it when I see it on South Park or on a TV show, and I remember
I think there's like a subcategory of swear words because there's some swear words that are always meant to be swear words
from the inception.
Like cunt. Going back all through time, like that was as far back. Like you look at the thing that was always meant to be like it was coney, bunny rabbit, hole.
Huh. Okay.
Like it was always.
It's euphemistic.
It was always meant to be like a bit edgy, but there's words like Negro and retard that just meant like a retarded development. That's a very scientific engineering term. Like you can say like this thing is you've retarded the growth of this thing. Yeah.
It's written on sheet music sometimes. It's like a retardando, but then if it's like in French or something, it'll just say retard, which just makes me giggle.
I think those words are quite interesting. I don't know if that's a modern phenomenon of like just reality. Describing it in cold, neutral terms. People, once that word becomes associated with what it actually is, people don't want to hear that word, even though it's not designed to be an offensive word.
But you can say offensive words with venom, and you can say them affectionately.
But I'm saying, why did that become?
Because people started saying it with venom.
I don't know.
I think there's an effect of people trying to lie to themselves about reality by stopping people using words. So if we accept that there's some people who have more limited mental capacity, then other people will use that as an insult. That's inevitably going to happen.
Yeah, they use it for people who aren't actually retarded.
Yeah.
But then there's a different group who I may be wrong here, but I think that they like to pretend that there is no such thing as differences in mental ability. So they could try and like block out the whole word altogether. Maybe I'm wrong there, but it feels
in that case, maybe. I think you're wrong, but I think I see what you're saying. Yeah. Maybe more generally, there's a I mean, that's the George Orwell trap of just try to get rid of the word that describes the thing you don't like, and you can go an awful long way to stopping people thinking about it, stopping them talking about it, and then it just falls out of usage, and it no longer enters people's minds almost.
But people will always be able to find a way through language, I think, to describe the things they want to talk about.
I mean, like it just ends up being that new word is now offensive. Like the Spastic Society, that was their name, and then they changed it. I don't remember what it's called now.
Probably something that will be an insult to.
That's what I mean.
Enough, yeah.
I think it's because I think in the 70s, like spastics were really pushed on like. The Spastic Society was on in Blue Peter a lot. They really pushed it out there. Yeah. And the kids learned it.
Yeah.
And it was like excellent.
I mean,
this word I can use on everyone, and everyone knows what it means, but it's not a swear word. And it
good point. And it is fun to say as well. It's like I don't know why it sounds like sparkle or something. It sounds like a fun word to say.
And there's also words that were maybe were swear words, but now people even like gyp or whatever.
Oh, like a gypsy. Yeah, like what a gyp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got gypped by that,
I heard that if you call someone a Burke, it's rhyming slang with Berkeley Hunt.
A
pinhead.
Okay.
Yeah, pinhead.
Is that like a dickhead?
Have you heard of someone called
I've heard of someone called a pinhead, but what's
pinhead is microcephaly, when you're born with that brain condition. That's what they're called pinheads.
I thought you just meant like brainlet, like your head is so tiny.
Well, they literally, they do have tiny brains, microcephaly.
Oh, interesting.
We had a just to wrap up this point. I don't know if I don't know how this could possibly dox myself, but in my high school, the I don't even know what the remedial classes, shall we say, would meet in the room called D9. Okay. And D9 became our word for
interesting.
retard.
Wow, yeah.
And I the teachers can't tell you like that's a bad word. Like D9, like it's absolutely the furthest thing away from a swear word or like an insult.
I'm sure.
And I'm pretty sure you could get in trouble for calling someone D9.
Yeah. But when you create a scientific way to describe the thing, that makes it almost more delicious, doesn't it? If you're using the exact term to be really precise, it almost implies that you're like an expert and you've classified this person as having a small intelligence. Like, it's impossible to get away from. I do think this worry about Orwellian language is a bit overstated. So if you prevent words from existing, languages, like, do you remember that XKCD comic where he describes, was it the lunar lander using only the 1,000 most common
it's a whole
words?
book of it, yeah.
So so he made a whole book.
Thing explainer.
So that tells me that language is extremely flexible. We can get away without jargon, and swear words to some degree is jargon. It's a shorthand if we need to. And even if you banned the 1,000 most commonly used words, I'm sure that there'd be words to replace all of those. So the point, I think, is that the language we use is really a reflection of the thoughts that we're having, the attitudes that we have. That, in a sense, the people who say, "Oh, words aren't magic," are correct. There's always, you can find another language in which that set of consonants and vowels means something completely inert. And meanwhile, they have a very common word that in English is offensive. Or same thing with hand gestures, right? You can be cussing, but just using your hands or just using an expression or whatever. Should we be using our words to cause somebody else to be upset? Should we be using our words to make everybody who listens to us consider the world to be an uglier place? Should we be using... I think there's lots of reasons that we should be careful with the language that we use. However, the flip side of that is, if we are careful which language we use, we maintain its potency. Like when a word is overused, this is what I was kind of saying earlier, like sometimes there's situations where what you want is to be super angry, like it's appropriate to be raging at something, at true outrage. So if you're raging because somebody cut you up in your car, you've anybody who sees that behaviour in you won't listen when something really needs that kind of reaction. So that's one of the benefits, I would say, to being a little bit guarded in how we speak, how we talk, you know.
I'm just conscious that the chat has been very slow, which makes me worried.
Are we not streaming?
I mean, I checked it, and we are, but then I wonder if it's not listed or something. This says 41 people watching. They're all just. Oh no, it's just not updating the chat. There are people chatting.
So we weren't ignoring you, chat. We just couldn't see.
Charlotte made it in the chat.
Click on the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, it was popped out. It was just that it wasn't on OBS. It wasn't showing me that.
I also checked chat on your screen. I was like, what's going on? Are we not live? I checked on my phone.
Do you know how to do
it? It claims we're live.
Is that
now control? And
here we go. There's a plus sign here. All right.
I imagine I'll get lots of pushback, so I'm hoping that.
Well, I was going to say, I think you're absolutely right on that last point, which is why I think including swears in your normal language, in specific situations, you can use it just like you use any other words. So it as a form of social cohesion. When you are normally guarded and use your words very precisely and politely, it then makes it kind of special when among friends you let your guard down, you be a bit cheeky, you say a few naughty words, you say things you wouldn't normally, you know.
Yeah.
It's the difference between having a conversation around the water cooler and having a conversation down the pub.
Mm-hmm.
Where you
it's also somewhat of a trust exercise, you know.
Yes.
It's like
you're showing that you trust someone, and when they laugh or whatever, they're showing that they appreciate
it's
it.
vulnerable, like when wolves bite each other's tongues.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that?
No.
When wolves in like packs, they'll put their tongue in another wolf's mouth.
Whoa.
Okay.
And it's like, I'm submitting to you, I'm vulnerable to you, and it bonds them together. Like you can see there's some gifs of them trying to do it with women.
Well, the wolves doing it with female wolves.
No, with
Women doing it with
actual
other
women.
women.
with women, yeah.
What? Describe what you're talking about, because I can't believe
It's just
it.
like because they're like it's one of those tame wolves or whatever, and the wolf is like oh, you're in my pack. So the wolf is trying to lick their face or whatever, but it's not.
Ah, the wolf is trying to do it with the woman.
I don't know. The woman isn't trying to lick it. I mean, maybe you could probably find something like that.
I mean, you see all the time that women with their dogs, and the dog is like licking their face. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe that's what they're doing.
I think the licking face thing is probably like based on the same instinct, but they're like because dogs are retarded wolves. They haven't quite got it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think the idea is that the other wolf sees that signal and opens its mouth to receive the tongue. That's the formal handshaking.
That's the wolf protocol right there.
And so maybe dogs, when they're licking your face, they're going like,
Open
open your mouth, please. I want to put my tongue in it. And then you will not bite it, and then we're friends.
But the human equivalent of that is probably like, I'll tell you my vulnerabilities. Like if I reveal what
I mean, the thing
makes
is,
me hurt, if you talk about
there's like infinite like different
yeah.
different cultural ways of doing it. Yeah, but I think it's one of the ways that you go like it's a trust. It's one of the ways that you go like this isn't. We're not talking to my parents. We're not talking to my. I'm not trying to get on a job interview. I trust you. You trust me, and we're just it's a shibboleth that this is a close knit social group.
The funny thing is that perhaps in the English culture more than other cultures, Australians as well, typically they'll do the opposite of the wolf thing, where to show that you're being cool with each other, to show bonding, will usually kind-heartedly insult each other.
Yeah.
And when you show that you can be insulted and not be hurt, take it as good as you can give it or whatever, then you can be friends. And I remember specifically, because it included a swear, I was going to bring it up with this story, this stream. When I was at work, I just started, I was trying to fit in with the other people of that age group. There weren't many young people, so there was like a kind of clique at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And if you went and sat with them at that time, you kind of get involved in their chat or whatever. So over like a few weeks, I was trying to integrate myself into this young people group. And I can't even remember what I said, but I gave... I was giving out a little bit of banter to a guy who was like 2 years older than me. I good-naturedly insulted something about him, and he didn't laugh, but he like gave me rolled his eyes or something, and then he raised two fingers at me.
Yeah.
For Americans, that's kind of like raising one finger.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was just like whatever. Like he did that, and I was like, I knew I was in there.
You're in.
Like he took it the right way. He wasn't
Right.
he wasn't mad at me, but he was like, he was like, oh yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah,
You're being
male bonding thing.
Yeah, it felt like the equivalent of putting my tongue in a wolf's mouth. It was like a tangible moment where I knew we trusted each other.
Yeah. Now, you will come across, I think, people like me who quite frequently won't use strong curse words. But I actually have somewhat more disdain for the medium level curse words.
Well, you don't like the shoot.
Where you don't commit. Like, if you're going to swear, I think go full go for it. The halfway house feels to me like moral cowardice. Like, I am the extreme other end. But in a way, I've got less content. Like, I can appreciate when somebody's thought out opinion is, I think swearing is fine and I'm just going to go for it. But if what you're saying to the world is, I think swearing is bad, so I'm going to do just a small amount of it, that feels like the bottom of the barrel morally.
No, but when you say a small amount, I'm saying it's context. And it almost defines the context, the fact that we are letting our guards down and swearing and talking about, maybe blue subjects.
Yeah.
That's not what you mean by doing it a small amount, like doing it infrequently, or is that what you mean?
I was meaning using, like you said, shoot as an example.
Yeah, you don't like shoot.
We know, everybody knows, shoot is a similar sounding enough word that it gives you like 50%
you just put it in your head.
Satisfaction of having used the proper swear word.
Yeah, yeah. I find that I feel the same way about the N-word, like saying the N-word.
Yeah.
I've just said the N-word in my head. When you
forced
hear
all of us to do it.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm going to say it in the stream just because I don't want to get demonetized, and it is such a caustic word that it does make you flinch, like in a way, like worse than any swear word. It's so funny, but there is an almost visceral reaction to hearing it sometimes.
It's weird because I don't remember it being a big deal, like in the 90s.
Was it used frequently?
It really
No.
I remember when I was like late primary school, it was like watching films and trying to find a new worst swear word.
You were hunting for
the lost word.
I think it was when I watched I can kind of remember a debate I had with one of my friends about whether bullshit was worse than shit.
I think it's
that
not.
bullshit is like I was advocating that bullshit was worse than shit because I think I heard it in Monster Squad.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I was like, oh, this must be a much.
It's like
a super version of shit.
Like cocaine and then crack cocaine. It's like the stronger.
So, but I'd never I'm sure if I had heard about the N-word, then.
But what I'm saying is that's what shoot is to shit is what the N-word is to the N-word, where everyone's just said it in their head, and you've just done the exact same thing, but that's the socially acceptable version of it.
Yeah, I just don't know about if the N-word's because of like post-internet, America's culture has become a lot more interconnected.
I'm sorry I brought it up. Let's just go on.
When I was at school, it was pretty well agreed that the C word was the worst word.
Yeah.
I didn't think I knew that one yet.
But I remember having a conversation with a friend and telling him, actually, in my opinion, and I still feel this way, genuinely gutturally, when people use blasphemous language, right?
Is that worse?
Casually, that hits me emotionally harder than either a hard N or there isn't any language, because that's something, I guess it's personal to me. I feel that, and this isn't a third commandment, go and watch my stream if you want the full, discussion of that. But to me, it's a, I guess people talk about what is it that is your identity, right? And probably the reason that people people with black skin feel most offended by the N-word is because at the core of their identity, those people who find it the most offensive word, it's an offence because you're attacking what they consider their identity to be. And I can relate to that in the sense that when people are using religious terminology in a flippant way, they are making light of something that's very important to me. So I do understand what it means to be offended by language, and I think from that perspective I would try to avoid offending other people as well, even if the thing that they were going to be offended by I thought was extremely trivial and didn't matter.
You mean like a picture of Muhammad?
Well, so that would be an easy example. It's somebody with a different religion, it's easy for me to relate to that. But if somebody was like, I don't know, I consider baking to be the core of my identity. If I wouldn't use Victoria Sponge lightly around in their presence. I don't know.
That's a bad analogy. Sorry.
It doesn't exist. But
I have a story that just popped into my head that my grandfather liked to tell. He was a teacher in India for a long time, and one day, I think it was like in his first year before he'd really learnt the customs, he was nailing up a poster or something at the front of a class when class was in session, and he couldn't get the nail in properly, or the thumbtack or something. So he took off his shoe to hammer it in, and he said the class, like, they stood up, like they were like out of their minds, like outraged. They weren't like coming to get him or anything. They were just like shocked. Like someone had just like, I don't even know if there's a language equivalent of it, but to take off your shoe in India, it's
It's a Middle Eastern as well, like you
Yeah.
expose the bottom of your shoe
Well,
to
that's
somebody.
that's the those clips from the.
Yeah, that's
What
like
was that
yeah.
network? I will show, by Allah, I will show you my shoe.
Yeah, like do you remember that George Bush got someone, a journalist for a shoe at George Bush?
Huh.
There's a famous clip of him like
Yeah.
dipping. It's like the shoe is like a big deal. Like even sitting like this is like considered offensive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so I think it's reasonable if you're in that culture to follow their customs, I would say.
Yeah, well, he did it like completely unintentionally. It's just so funny that is something that it would be a bit odd if your teacher did that. But I had a teacher who didn't wear shoes. The head teacher was often telling him to put shoes on, but he would walk around in his socks, which is quite endearing.
Yeah.
The students liked it. But yeah, that's something that's not offensive to us.
No.
It's kind of like what you were saying about how in other cultures, some of our normal words would be swear words to them, and some of their swear words just sound like nothing, or they sound like a normal word for us.
It's kind of interesting that like cultures almost need to have taboo things to function. Like it's completely arbitrary.
Yeah. What it is.
Yeah.
It could be a shoe, or it could be the word retard.
There has to be this like, maybe it's like a like what is it like play fighting? Or not play fighting. You know, like animals like don't fight. They sort of like
pretend to fight.
Well, they have aggressive displays of pseudo fighting. Like there's like sometimes they actually fight a bit, but they don't really try and kill each other. Maybe that's like swear words are a bit like that for us.
Is it arbitrary though? I reckon if you studied the set of words that are considered
it's probably not completely
curse
arbitrary.
words.
No, I'm saying I think what he's saying is that it could be arbitrary and it wouldn't matter because as long as you have somewhere to go when you are feeling a height of excitement or outrage, whatever the word you say is, doesn't matter what it actually means. Usually it's scatological, or it's in reference to sex, or it's in reference to some taboo subject.
Yeah, if swear words didn't exist, we'd have to invent them.
Yeah, and or it would be G9.
Yeah. So in some groups, the words that you would go to if you wanted to do maximum damage would be like white supremacist. Because
or racist, I mean,
or racist more generally. Yeah, you're a racist. That's like
I think you're right. Actually, racist has become it's like the opposite of retard. Like to be racist is like we're all racist, but he's a white supremacist.
Why is it that insulting intelligence became important? Probably that comes out of the Enlightenment, right? Who are the highest people in our cultures is the scientists. Who is the opposite of the scientists? It's somebody who couldn't be a scientist even if they tried.
Yeah, and I think it's in certain cultures, the people say your mother, or they'll insult one's mother, which it's not something that I've heard, but I've heard that to some people that's incredibly offensive, and you could say the same thing and say your father, and you'd be like, I don't care, whatever. I don't know why that just jumped into my head, but there's nothing intrinsically. Yeah, even just saying your mother apparently is like offensive to some people.
I've heard it used that way. I don't think it's taken seriously in our culture, but
Maybe
maybe not anymore. But
you're people at my school that used to get. You could wind them up quite easily by saying that. Oh, I'm not talking. The people at my school, I do remember people using that on certain individuals that were known to be sensitive to saying your mother, that would get it said to them.
Yeah.
Because like if you say your mother to him, he freaks out.
I have a friend who his mum is quite young and quite healthy, shall we say, and all of his friends would they would call his mum a MILF. And that was the way you would wind him up. Is to say like they would be quite creative about it. They weren't like being crude. They'd be like extremely complimentary. They'd go, "Your mother is beautiful. I had a dream about your mother last night." Just be quite sweet about it. That would that really annoyed him.
Yeah, of course. It used to be a common insult to imply that somebody was born out of wedlock.
Yeah.
That kind of doesn't have any punch anymore because I think people don't really value marriage.
And what else?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so what?
Yeah.
I do wonder if it will come back a little bit with Game of Thrones.
What do you mean the bastard?
Bastard was like big in Game of Thrones.
Okay.
The word bastard.
The bastard and the concept of being a bastard.
Right.
Yeah,
Feel
they didn't use it as a swear word.
But
They just used it descriptively.
Yeah,
I mean, the books. There's more in the books about how like bastards are cursed and like
yeah,
are like intrinsically evil and stuff like that, and you can't trust one.
yeah. Their birth was not blessed by the gods.
Yeah.
I think that's what they said. But if you asked me, I mean, I always knew that bastard meant you were born to unmarried parents, or you never knew your father, or whatever. But if you at any point in my life, if you asked me to actually define what it means to call someone a bastard, I'd say usually male,
right.
Disagreeable. I don't like him. He's too mean, or he's he does things that I don't like.
That's interesting that you mentioned gendered insults, because it's true.
Yeah.
And I also, do you remember that ban bossy campaign? There was like,
don't call a woman bossy.
Don't call a woman bossy, and it seems anecdotally true that bossy is an insult that's usually, maybe even exclusively, used for girls. Why do you think that is?
I've asked myself this, and what feminists will tell you is that the same bossy behaviour in women is seen as assertive in men, where it's actually good when men do it. It's not just that it's not called bossy; it's actually not even seen as negative, which is why it's kind of difficult to imagine it. I think that the bossiness comes from the fact that women sometimes get positions of power that they can then use to be a little bit overbearing, shall we say. Overbearing is also often used for women.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason why a man can't be overbearing, but it's a softer way of saying bossy. It's still just as gendered, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when a woman is being overbearing, shall we say, there's not the same... you don't have the same recourse that you would if a man was doing it, where you can call him out on it, or you can challenge his authority. Where women are treated a little bit softer, and therefore when they're being bossy, the only thing you can do is call them bossy, and that's it. You can't really challenge them. You can't actually take away that power or give them real shit for it. To be disparaging about it, shall I say, more articulately. I don't know, but it's
interesting.
Maybe a subject for another stream, but that is... that's... If someone called me bossy, that would... that would hurt. No one's ever called me bossy, thank God, but...
To
my face, yeah.
I thought it was relevant just because it's on this... I think it's on the spectrum of language used to hurt somebody... Possibly not that that's its primary purpose.
Yeah, based on their identity.
You know that's going to be one of the effects of what you said. But I think when somebody is told that they're being bossy, a girl, I guess, in this case, it's actually intending to correct a behaviour that's actually quite often not good behaviour. And in that case, I don't think it's bad to say something that's going to hurt somebody. So I guess when I was saying earlier, like, if you use a word, you don't want to use your speech to hurt someone. That's not entirely true. I think sometimes you want to correct. You want to use your speech to upset somebody because you actually disagree with what they're doing. You want them to change either for their benefit or for others.
But in the case of being bossy, let's say, there are much more specific ways that you could help them change. Rather than just attacking them, it's often much easier to give them advice and say, have you tried letting someone else be in charge? Something like that. Yeah, something that they can actually action on, which is often the case with insults. Insults are not really constructive, but they can be... I think when you hurt someone, you do make them...
It's part of like social conditioning, isn't it? It's like when Jordan Peterson was talking about like in the normal world, you're interacting with a random set of people, and their reactions to you, they're not random, but because they're a random set of people, they're normalizing your behavior. So like their like attitude towards you, like if everyone around you doesn't like you, then or saying the same thing, then you're pressured into reevaluating yourself. So I think that's one of the like insults are part of that. If everyone's insulting you in the same way, it's kind of, unless you're completely narcissistic, you might take that in as maybe I should change the way I act and conform to the group that I'm interacting with.
Yeah, when I was at school, I wouldn't say I was bullied, but there was one girl who, for some reason, didn't like me. And every time she saw me, she would tell me my hair was greasy. And my hair was greasy. None of my friends would tell me my hair was greasy. And I was at that age where I wasn't self-conscious enough to even really be aware of the fact that I wasn't washing my hair. Because, you know, I don't know if people know this, but you, as a child, you don't make all of the oils that make your hair greasy. So I was only like washing my hair like once a week, and then puberty hit, and I didn't change my behaviour. I only started washing my hair because this girl at school would tell me my hair was greasy every day.
So her intention was
to hurt me.
To hurt you, okay. But as a side effect, actually helped.
If she knew that it helped, that would make me really mad. Actually, if she was
listening,
if she knew that she'd changed my behaviour, that would really annoy me, because I would hate to think that she felt good about that.
Right. Yeah.
But in the end, I think there is a corrective action to that, and if she'd said it in a nicer way, I probably would have corrected my behaviour anyway, now that I think about it. But
I mean, in a way, it's nicer.
There's no nice way to say your hair's greasy. If it came from a friend, it would hurt more.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I was going to say is, like, it's actually nicer to get bullied, be told by a stranger in an aggressive way, than being told gently by your friend.
That's what
if your friend took you aside and said, like, Polly, I love you and everything, but your hair is greasy and you smell. Like, at least when someone like that doesn't like you saying it, you can kind of go like, oh, it's not that bad. But
that guy's just being mean. Yeah.
But isn't it part of life that you have to feel terrible from time to time? Like, isn't that how we grow?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
Actually, being told something by a friend is more hurtful. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also more effective. You will change your behaviour quicker. I think we assume, in a way, that our lives should be just filled with pleasant experiences, and as long as you're not actually a villain, then you're never going to be doing anything that bad. But I don't think that's true. Most of us have a lot of ways that we can grow and improve. Like, we should be spurring each other on to be our best selves. And if that means having slightly less positive experiences in our life, I don't know. I like how I've come in here starting with, like, let's be sweetness and light, and now I've completely switched. We need to, if somebody's slightly overweight, you call them fatso. If somebody's got a slight smell, then you just like bully them for it until they get better.
Maybe key their car, put fat in it.
Exactly. This is the only real way to go forwards.
If you love them, you'll do that.
Yeah, I think it does come on to something I wanted to talk about, which is just speaking much more broadly about wholesome speech. I wrote down the words, I think, gossiping, complaining, and insulting people we've already covered, I think. But I became very sensitive to gossip. I think perhaps because of my Christian upbringing, I don't like talking. I mean, there is a part of me that is like loves it, but I try not to talk negatively about people when they're not there. You know, it's actually better to make it into a joke and sort of lightheartedly, tell someone what your problem is with them in the softest way possible. Not gently, but making it into a joke, banter type of situation. But to say that about someone when they're not there, I don't feel good about that in what you could say spiritually. I don't know if you have any thoughts on. I know gossiping is specifically mentioned in the Bible.
Definitely, yes. Sometimes the Bible is very helpful and explicitly tells you something's bad, and then it's easy to switch off your brain and say, "Oh well, I've been told not to do it." So,
but she did something really bad, and I had to. Everyone must know.
I tell you, in Christian circles, sometimes this is a problem because people will tell each other gossip under the guise of it being a prayer request. We're like, oh, we really need to pray for such and such because, you know...
He's been hitting the bottle again.
Yeah. Like 90 minutes later worth of gossip, and then you go, all right, let's pray. So...
That's brilliant.
I thought it was being 90 minutes long prayer. It was like, oh, well, please.
90 minutes of prayer.
Have you noticed the way he cuts his fingernails? It's gross. And also...
you could do the same thing in prayers as well. You could be like... You know that somebody in the group has a particular like thing that's annoying you, and you can pray a generic prayer. Let us all grow in this area. and you're like
Yeah.
really leaning into that because you want somebody to hear it.
Well, that's something that our conductor used to do in the band.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, when we were very young. When you're older, the conductor would just tell you if you're off key or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But when we were kids, we would the conductor would be kind of nice to us, and if one of us was, sometimes me, doing something wrong, he'd address the entire group and say, "Can we try to,
Yes.
You know, just don't
Shit, probably.
if you can't sing that note, just don't sing it. Don't try to sing it.
Right.
If it's too high, you don't need to sing it." You know, stuff like
Well,
that.
in the last year, if we can all make sure that we're on mute, there's clearly one person who's making a lot of noise.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, gossip is a way to build group dynamics again. And I think most people would agree that gossip is bad. Whereas people will defend swearing on the basis of it's helpful because it helps us bond as a group. I think this is a useful worked example of like, well, sometimes a bad behaviour will have a good side effect, and that doesn't excuse it. So yes, gossip. Right. If the three of us were to turn off the webcam and start gossiping about somebody, we would feel bonded. But that's a benefit that is smaller than the downside of gossiping as a behaviour in general.
Yeah, I felt bad the times when I've heard some gossip that actually makes me dislike someone. Because liking someone or going cold on them, it's something you really can't control. If you don't like someone, you can't make yourself like them. And if you've heard something about them, or you've even just heard that someone else doesn't like them, it'll make you start looking out for the things that you don't like about them.
Yes.
And it's hard you can't make yourself like someone after that, I think.
Yeah, and when it becomes the opinion of your clique that somebody else is bad, you see this all the time on the internet. It doesn't even have to be private in that case, but it's kind of we're bonded by disliking that person, and you're sitting there quietly thinking, I actually like that person for one reason or another, but I'm going to keep quiet, and if anybody asks me, or you saw this actually quite frequently with maybe in a lesser way, but with political things, we've all been in the situations where the group is united in their opinion on something that you disagree on, and you just like have to keep quiet, right? And that's fine, but when it is something that needs you to speak up, I don't know, going against the group dynamic is really difficult. And again, I think
there's a psychological element where it actually influences your opinion as well.
Yeah.
It's actually hard to maintain that opinion even within yourself when no one else shares it, I think.
Yeah, there's tons of like psychological studies like showing that, isn't there? Where like you get people they go like, 1 + 2 is 5 or whatever, and then they ask everyone to put their answers in, and they put their answers in, and they get the group together, and there's plants in the group. Yeah. And people will say it's 5, and they're like, and there's one guy in that group that isn't a plant, and the various different sometimes there's more than one, and sometimes there's whatever, but it shows like it doesn't take that many people to be wrong, but to influence a group into making other people switch their opinion to something that they know is wrong.
Have you heard that real life example? My biology teacher told me this, and I might be remembering it wrong, but she said that for a while, like not very long, but after the discovery of chromosomes, it was thought that there were 24 chromosomes in the human genome, because the first guy who counted them counted wrong, and everyone else after that who counted 23 went, oh no, I've got that wrong, counted again, 24. Or maybe just no one picked it up, but apparently for a while people thought it was 24. That guy must have been embarrassed. But
yeah, I'd like to defend though, in the case where you're in a room full of people and everybody's saying one thing,
you're probably wrong.
But people always used to say, would you jump off a bridge if everyone else was jumping off it? Like, yes, probably. I probably would jump off the bridge, and I'd feel justified, up to the moment that I died.
Well, yeah, well, that's Jordan Peterson said that the other day. He said, like, well, how high is the bridge? How deep is the water under it? Like, seriously, if everyone else is doing it, like, maybe you're a wuss if you don't do it.
I mean, there's a reason why we evolved that.
Yeah.
The ability to be
It's
pressured
a
by the group.
fantastic heuristic.
Yeah.
I think if you've got a reason to believe, if you've got an explanation for why everyone else is acting incorrectly, that's a different matter. Because then you can understand why this heuristic doesn't apply in this situation. But if you've got no reason to, if everyone else behaving this way, as far as you know, is the same as you probably just are missing a piece of information.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's actually, to a real extent, the consensus is correct by being the consensus.
Yeah.
Or the correct path is, it's like, I mean, in sort of like the olden days, there was no right opinion. Like, there was no science or anything, so you couldn't be 100% right about things. The important thing was to have a consensus of an opinion, so that everyone in the group was trying to do that one thing, so you weren't having half the group doing one thing and half the group doing another thing, and it meant that no one got anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that you had, like, somebody that would have a strong opinion, right or wrong, doesn't matter. If this guy's got a strong opinion, let's all follow him, because more people will follow him. So we're not looking for the person that's right, we're looking for the person that will make most people do what he says.
Yeah.
So that we have a coherent group policy and we move in the same direction. But I think that's what you see like a lot of times when you like successful YouTubers. They're not the smartest or like the most right. They're the people that will go like, "You're wrong." They'll go like, "Obviously, things blah 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 like that."
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so
they're speaking confidently.
just look at Vouch. I mean, Vouch is like that's everything he does. He's really not a smart guy, but he's so like you hear what he says and like he's going like this, but you think like it's hard not to think that he must know something. Like you go, that's wrong, isn't it? But it's like he's really like you couldn't imagine yourself being so confident in that thing.
Yeah, that's well, that kind of brings me back to the Hitler's quote about the big lie, where people most of the time they come up with little lies. The lies that most people tell are small and they have a practical purpose. So when you see someone lying in a big way and being completely certain of it, or appearing certain of what they're saying, you expect other people to lie in the same way that you lie. So you're not expecting someone to come along and just tell you something false and to be completely certain of it.
And people always model themselves and other people's behaviours as well. So they try to explain what they're observing by saying, what would need to be happening to me in order to be behaving that way?
Yeah.
I might tell a small lie because of a circumstance, but the only way that I would behave that way is if that was true. The way that they were behaving was like based on facts. It also reminds me of like ants when they're foraging. If they find a food source, they'll lay like loads of pheromones. Now, one random ant that's gone mad and starts spamming pheromones all over the place is going to lead the whole colony in the wrong direction. But nonetheless, this is a behaviour that clearly works in general. Like, if you're an ant putting down a load of pheromones, you're trustworthy. If you're a person in society putting forwards a lot of opinions, people will listen to you, especially if it's new opinions they haven't heard before. I think the Jordan Peterson phenomenon is quite like this, right? People watched hours of his content and heard loads of stuff that was new that they hadn't heard before, one way or another. So they just like were fascinated and locked on and listened to him, like took him as a leader. I think that's a very natural kind of human behaviour.
I think like he perfectly filled the vacuum that was kind of created by the opposing narrative, mainstream narrative that had been kept very like that is the only narrative.
Yeah.
Like there is this thing, and the media have to achieve their own consensus about what the nature of the reality was, and it's been pumping it out for years, And then Jordan Peterson, because of YouTube
Yeah.
and that phenomenon, like, well, it's not just Jordan Peterson, you know, it's people like Sargon and stuff like that. Maybe not perfect a person or whatever, but like he had the ability to say something that was counter to this narrative, and that people that weren't enthralled with that narrative could then have a completely new thing to follow. And it was like, like water to
I think
thirsty man or whatever.
I think Sargon's another good example of that. I remember when I came across his channel way back, I watched hours and hours of it because it was like, these are opinions I've never heard before, and spoken so confidently against the kind of the status quo. I think Moldbug is another probably good example. It's like, this is just a bombardment of new ideas that I've not come across, and people just become obsessed with these figures.
Someone said that they found my channel that way, and that then led them to AA's channel and a few other right-wing YouTubers, which completely surprised me. I never thought that I would be the gateway channel. I never thought I never thought I'd be Sargon, and I actually feel like some responsibility from that now. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's definitely something. And if there's one person who says that, there's probably more people.
You've also probably been responsible for being the gateway the other direction. I bet there's people who started with AA, came across your channel, and started hearing opinions.
What?
That were like...
And they took the what pill? Like I don't have a pill.
Yeah, but you're like you call yourself, in comparison to AA, right? You call yourself Poe the blue pilled. So
yeah, the moderate pills.
I think if you could ever find them, there'd be an equal number of people who are moving in both directions. Just because when you put out opinions in public, some people will be influenced towards you from one side, and some people will be influenced from you in the other direction. Mm.
There's I get what you're saying, but I think the pull, whatever direction I'm pulling is, there's not much behind it once you get in, if you got into that, you'd quickly run out of content. I haven't got that many videos myself, and you've got like your Benjamin Boyce, and like I'm trying to think of like what are the most adjacent channels, Desi Ray. So people who are like they're not pushing a certain narrative. They're just kind of interested in things the way I am. Maybe like Jordan Peterson, if they'd never heard of him before.
I think you underestimate yourself as a thinker. Like, people will watch your videos and hear you say things.
I didn't want to make this about me.
I'm just saying.
I mean, the people count would suggest that it's not.
People will hear your ideas and think about them, and they're in some ways like the same thing. When I say an opinion, it's something that's, by the time I'm saying it, it's boring to me because I've thought of it like years ago. But I think there's people listening who've not heard that perspective before, and then that gets the cogs turning, and sometimes they agree, sometimes they disagree. But
someone says I'm the pill to mitigate the side effects of other pills. Side effects pilled. I like it. I want to move on. We took a very big detour, very interesting.
That's true.
Away from gossiping, and I wanted to talk about complaining because that's something I don't like in other people, and I try not to do it myself. My husband disagrees, but it's something I've tried to cut back on, where I put it under the umbrella of just speaking negatively.
Right.
Where it's kind of like in Dark Souls, in Demon Souls, we have the world tendency, and the more you put out there, just swear words is one thing. You can use swear words in a positive way in some contexts, but when you say things that darken the atmosphere, you put into words the bad things that are happening to you, complaints, gossip. You just talk about the bad things other people have done. I think there is there's a magic world tendency, like you make the atmosphere around yourself a bit darker, and there's a place for complaining when it's not self-indulgent and it's corrective. Nagging. That's what I'm talking about.
The benefits of nagging.
Nagging isn't always positive, obviously, and I want to talk about marriage maybe when it comes up to our anniversary, so that we'll have an excuse to talk about it.
Wow, exciting.
And it's not going to be about how I'm right and you're wrong. But that is in any relationship, but maybe especially in marriage. You want to be putting as much positive atmosphere into the relationship as possible, and only introduce a negative thing when you either don't have a choice because your mood is so negative you can't do otherwise but to cry or to explain what's wrong with you, or when you're trying to be corrective about it, sort of like a therapy session almost, or when it's a workshop, things that I'm not happy with that could be changed. I do wonder about a lot of people will defend complaining as having a therapeutic effect, where just getting it off your chest and venting. I am a bit skeptical of that, although I am guilty of it myself. I wonder what you two think about complaining and venting.
Isn't complaining a very feminine trait?
That's what they say, but
I mean, it's because like men won't really complain about things.
That's a strong claim.
The stereotype is that
the way they complain is different. Like men might bitch about something, or it's not like no men, like not all men exactly, but like women complain in a sort of like things that they could do, like a man would just do. Women will complain about.
Well, the stereotype is that when a woman is complaining, a man will often offer a solution when the woman isn't looking for one. Mm-hmm. She's just looking to vent, as a therapeutic effect, to let everyone know what's going on with her. Women will often do this, especially with other women. But when a man is subjected to it, he'll often go, "I know what you got to do. Why don't you try that? Like, seriously." And then she'll go like, "Okay, well, da-da-da." And they go, "No, but what about this?" And that's, I'm not saying that's not good. That certainly works. They're trying to be proactive. It's definitely positive. But it is a kind of miscommunication that often happens between men and women. Not that that's what I was talking about, but what do you...
So, should you complain? In general, I think I'm with you in that I think people let themselves off too easily. I think the therapeutic effect argument could be used for a lot of bad stuff. So people could be like, "Oh, the only reason that I beat up that old lady was because it helped my mental health recover." So, it's not necessarily. It might be another case of like a bad justification for something. I think generally people do. Yes, if you're complaining for a therapeutic reason, as somebody listening, you might be best to not correct them in that moment, right? But actually, this kind of female response that you were describing is actually quite a useful thing. This is a very complicated question that you've asked, so I don't think my
I don't think there's a big difference between
thoughts are really together
at someone than just complaining.
Well, complaining in general shows a discontent in life. So, in my opinion, there are lots of amazing things about my experience in life that I just completely take for granted. And it's very easy for me to find myself in a situation where I'm moaning about this and that, the minutiae of my life that's not going well. When I've got access to unbelievable quantities of delicious food that's easily within my resource range. I've got friends that I can go to who will care about me. I've got a stable job. All these things I could be spending my time thinking about, but it's just a human instinct to say, what are the one or two things in my life that aren't going perfectly to plan? And the result of dwelling on those is that you feel sorry for yourself, you're ungrateful for things that you do have, your mood goes down, you drag the mood of others down, you're more likely to spiral in unhealthy directions in other ways in your life. So yeah, generally I think we do have the power to stop complaining by changing our perspectives, and we don't because it's self-indulgent. However, if somebody else was complaining to me, that's probably not what I would say. I don't think that's a very loving response to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limit, right? If someone's complaining to you and they do it, it's the first time they've ever complained about something, you'd probably be sympathetic. If they do it every day, you'd probably be, a bit sick of it.
Yeah.
There's a point where it becomes a personality fault.
It's helpful to, at some point, suggest to somebody they might have a different perspective on their life. But it's largely a battle people have to fight with themselves. So, yeah, I would encourage people to not complain. I think that's kind of what you were getting at, right?
Yeah, I think there definitely is a kind of Stoic philosophy lesson in focusing on things that are going well and taking stock of the good things in your life rather than focusing on the bad things. And the one Stoic technique that I've heard to help you when times are bad is negative ideation, where you will, in order to turn that positive stuff in your life into something that you are literally able to pay attention to, the only way that you can force yourself to care about it is if you imagine it's gone. Imagine, okay, so right now I'm upset with my husband. I won't even come up with a reason. You imagine, I can't even imagine what would make me upset with you. I'm sure someone at home could imagine it. Just imagine if I'd never met him. Imagine if he was dead. Imagine if he left me. It makes you grateful for things, and it is kind of twisted in a way. The only way that you can be grateful for something is to imagine if you didn't have it.
So what about Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was in about the worst situation you can be in life, and yet he took quite a stoic position, didn't he? He said, maybe I'm in the gulag, maybe I'm suffering physically, maybe I'm suffering mentally, maybe I'll never get out. But he looked around him and saw that there was people who were thriving in that situation and people who were just in an unspeakably horrible way, and that it was the attitude that set the two people apart. Yeah,
well, I often think about a passage from Dostoevsky's what is that one? Crime and Punishment. And I quoted this just the other day because I often think about it. He's talking about the man on death row, the guy who's about to be executed. He imagines that the man who's about to be executed would be happy to live on a mountainside, on a ledge that is only big enough for his feet to fit on, with no food and no water and no company.
Mm-hmm.
The man who's about to die, and who knows for certain that he's about to die, would be infinitely thankful to live the rest of his life on that ledge. And okay, I think when you put your, I mean, obviously some people are suicidal and can't even stand the life they have.
Yeah.
That's probably from an objective point of view a lot better than standing on a mountainside on a ledge. But I think for most people, imagining that man standing on the ledge, even if you are in a gulag, there are things you can be grateful for. The fact that you get to lie down at night, even if it's in a tiny bunk, infested with lice. There's always something to be thankful for, I think. And even if there is nothing right now, there are things in the past and things in the future that you can be thankful for. And I actually, that coming back to Christianity, that's one thing that I really like about praying and praying at meals, thanking God for just the fact that you have a meal to eat and that you have people to eat the meal with, and just for the day, often, thanks for the day the Lord has made.
Yes.
And there's something really positive about that, and words are magic. There's, you can just say to yourself, yeah, I'm happy, oh, thank God I'm alive, literally. Or you can say it out loud and have it be heard by the people who you're with. And there is something extra special about that. It makes it real in a way that just the thoughts in your head aren't quite as real.
I don't know how. I can feel that there's sort of two groups listening when you're talking about Christianity, because there's the group who are Christians and then there's the group who aren't. So just as speaking as a Christian, then I reframe quite a lot of the things that we were just talking about to do with contentedness and so on because I think we were talking about perspective, and you mentioned negative ideation, but I think I've got a much more powerful way to change my perspective, which is like,
yeah, bloody Stoics. What do they know?
right, yeah, get out of here, ancient Greek philosophers.
Marcus
Puny
Aurelius.
small fry in comparison with what I'm about to say. So to me, my life, however long I'm going to be alive, like say I live to, let's go crazy, 110, like I have a supremely long life. I genuinely have the view of like, oh, what happens during that time doesn't really matter, because my mindset is on a future that is infinite and is wonderful in a way that's not really based on like pinning down the reasons why. I could see a lot of people therefore concluding that religion is a sort of the ultimate cope. Like whatever's going on in your life, no matter how bad, if negative ideation doesn't work, just try imagining like hypothetical amazing things happening. I mean, I think there's good reasons to think that Christianity is in fact true, but be it true or cope, I can tell you it's very effective.
It's a good cope.
It's very, very effective, yeah. So I think a reason for not complaining from my perspective is like, well, you're just misunderstanding reality. But if you're not a Christian, like maybe you should complain, because like you're in a bad spot. I can understand if I put my hat on of like, or if I didn't have religion, I think I would probably be quite existentialist, sort of Nietzschean. I don't know. I find it hard to imagine not getting myself quite down if I thought really hard about reality and didn't have that ultimate kind of hope. But,
and that is that's the bad thing about being an atheist is, once you're dead, you're dead. That's it.
yeah.
Bye.
But I can also see that, like, oh yeah, well, if you're dead, you're dead. That's not actually a situation of suffering. I guess people will be like, well, I'll just enjoy my life while I'm around, and then when it's over, like I won't be here to complain. So
well, maybe that's a good segue to the larger context of what I'm even doing, inviting you here to talk about the Bible and stuff, and why I'm watching your Bible studies. I've talked about this on the channel before, just to make it clearer, because every time I think about it a bit clearer than I did before. And the thing about Christianity is that there are things in the Bible that I was brought up on the Bible, and I was often skeptical of many of it, the claims, many of the rules, such as swearing. Thinking, okay, those are the rules, but do I really have to follow them all the time? Like, surely times have changed, these rules don't really apply anymore. It's very context dependent, very much, interpretation dependent. And it's only recently that I've started to think about the things that the Bible forbids, and thinking about the times when I have broken those rules are not happy memories.
Interesting.
Those are usually regrets for me.
Okay.
And that's just one thing about Christianity. Just thinking about it in a Jordan Peterson metaphysical, just a description of not a scientific description of reality, but as a prescriptive way to live your life the best and to achieve the highest form of virtue. Yeah. To pursue your highest good that you could possibly achieve. I think there's something really attractive about that, and I think Christianity would be a great tool to do that. I don't think there's any way around the fact that I don't believe in an afterlife, but I'm fully on board with using words like God now. Okay. Even though I still think of myself as an atheist. Yeah. If you say, that, thank God I'm alive. Thank the Lord for this beautiful day. Thank God I have food on the table. To me, that means something meaningful, even though I don't believe in God the way that I used to think God was.
Yeah, there's lots of people who use religious language, like phrases that come from, say, the Bible, but they don't believe the Bible in a traditional way. Like Carl Sagan and Einstein and all that. Like, there's lots of people who've used like God, but are very explicitly like, oh, we don't believe.
I think in the Jordan Peterson sense, I think the line between believing and not believing isn't quite as clear as we might think. And I've just started noticing that about myself.
Yeah, the Jordan Peterson phenomenon was really interesting. Coming from a Christian perspective, but watching Jordan Peterson was fascinating because I resonated with a lot of what he was saying. But ultimately, if I was to go the full way and agree with his perspective entirely, I would actually be moving away from
You'd be
Christianity.
more atheist.
Yeah, whereas it seems like a lot of his audience come from a point where they were in the like new atheist camp, like Christopher Hitchens, Dennett, Dawkins, Sam Harris, and they'd lived there for like 5-10 years, and now they were being drawn towards the Bible, but in a different perspective than Christians. Well, okay, I want to say my definition of Christianity should be the official definition, and I understand other people will disagree with me.
Most Christians feel that way.
Indeed. So to me, to accept, so I love a lot of what Jordan Peterson says, but I would say to me to accept the Bible for its moral teachings and take God as a sort of metaphor to do sort of comparative religion stuff. But to not take Jesus at face value,
literally,
is a very dangerous path to walk. And I'm sure you're not surprised that that's my view.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's exciting to see the Bible become relevant again, and for people to take an interest in it. And I'd love to think there's lots of people like yourself watching my Bible studies. Fantastic. And if you get lots out of it and end up disagreeing with me about the historic reality of the resurrection or whatever, whatever. But I think we've had a positive interaction in that you've enjoyed the Bible studies and so on. But I would be, I want to be honest about that. To me, the key question is not, does Christianity offer some wisdom for us to live this life? It's I really take it seriously. What's the afterlife situation? So I really feel ambivalent about this. Do you know what I mean?
I just to describe from the atheist perspective.
Yeah.
I think what Jordan Peterson has done is to take the Bible and to take Christian beliefs and to justify them enough where you, even as an atheist, you can understand the wisdom of it, and even understand the metaphorical symbology of it, to the point where you can sort of believe it, even if you don't really believe it. TM.
I think there's a lot of symbolism that Jordan Peterson has unearthed, which is accurate and true and great, and that it's like his discovery. So I think there's real things that Christians can learn about the Bible from Jordan Peterson. So fantastic. Yeah. And if the effect of this is to remove a barrier, like some people would say, especially coming from the Dawkins perspective of the God described in the Bible is just evil and the whole book is unspeakably terrible and we should just burn them all. If that was a barrier stopping people from investigating Christianity, then that's wonderful. But I don't want Jordan Peterson to necessarily be there's this term, isn't there? Containment, right? The idea that there's an acceptable limit on how far you can.
Yeah, it's kind of like the forest fires that they start in order to stop the forest fires spreading.
Yeah. And although Peterson, for whatever reason, is careful in how he phrases it, to me it's clear he's not talking as somebody who takes Christianity as
facts.
Yeah, as a straightforward, honest. For me, the Bible is scripture that God gave us in order to understand him and the world, and there's a level of abstraction and obfuscation implied by Jordan Peterson's reading of it that seems doesn't quite jibe with me.
Yeah. Oh, just to come back to swearing,
Sorry,
I was explaining what I what I'm doing here, which is, often it doesn't take much examination, it seems. With some careful thought, often wisdom from the Bible can be justified.
Yes.
If you just think about it and talk about it a bit. So, with all this business of swearing and wholesome speech,
Yeah.
I thought that being able to talk about it, we might be able to come to a place where even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in Christianity, you can still find a justification for being for being wholesome with your speech and believing that words are magic, even if you don't believe they are literally magic.
Yes. I haven't actually read any passages from the Bible. Did you want to just hear a verse or two?
Yeah. What was the verse of the wholesome speech?
Well, I'll tell you what. It comes up in a couple of places, but this is actually one I've got. So, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up, according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Builds people up. I like that. Like
it's a verse that justifies itself.
Yeah, you don't. You could read that in Oprah Winfrey.
That's not how it finishes. Right, but anybody listening to that will probably feel the inherent sense in what it's saying, right?
Yeah.
Like what could possibly be the negative side effects in you living your life in a way that you use your speech in order to build other people up rather than knock them down?
Well, not Hitler. I mean, you need to. Yeah, it's all context dependent, isn't it? So you need to.
Interesting.
So you do need to build people up, but there are times when you need to take people down. So you get someone like Ned Flanders in The Simpsons, who's maybe a bit too nice, and he lets Homer borrow his stuff all the time, and rather than being trying to be mean, to be a mean neighbor and to insist that perhaps he returns some of his things.
But it doesn't say.
It doesn't say be a pushover.
Use your speech in order to make other people feel nice. It says, use your speech to build others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So, in the case where somebody needs to be told that they're being bossy, you just tell them. But, genuinely.
But with a view to build them up, not to alleviate your own feelings.
If you're spending time with friends and one of them's behaving badly, I think it's an application of that verse that you say something to them that they will feel hurt by, but it builds them up. And you don't. So if they did something, I don't know, they did something lewd or inappropriate, and you just kind of laughed along with it, that wouldn't be building them up. So we shouldn't read that verse as being like, be like Ned Flanders, a wet pushover. Like, that verse could mean saying something that takes some courage to say.
Absolutely.
But this is what Jordan Peterson said about judgment, how it was good to judge people.
Yeah, if you respect someone, you can judge them. But I think that there's another way.
Saying like it was pretty much that. It was just that judgment is like a purifying act. When you're judging somebody, you only judge somebody if you aspire for them to be better.
If you can see the potential in them.
Yeah.
Doing better.
Like, you're judging them.
Well, that's what your mother would. No, I don't mean your mother. I mean all of our mothers. If you're an adult and you have a mother, then you've probably received a few criticisms from your mother about your living space, your choice of life. So, I think most people's mothers are like this, where
arbitrary things that go fleet through their mind.
But I'm saying that it's very common to have a critical mother, because she feels that it's her, not just her right, but it's her imperative to improve your life with her speech and to point out places where you are lacking, in her opinion.
Yeah. Can you feel as a parent a difference between when you say something as a genuine corrective to your daughter versus you're lashing out emotionally and you sort of regret it after? I'm not a parent, so I
yeah,
just
well, definitely. I mean, when it comes to hitting your child, not that that's what I've done, but I think there is a big difference between hitting a child in anger and using it as a corrective punishment, and those two things are a world apart. where I think we've all had this feeling of explosive rage where you want to hit something.
Yeah.
And if your child is there, you might want to hit, and they're screaming at you, you might want to hit them. That is completely different from when they've misbehaved. You might be angry at them, but you take control of yourself and issue a corrective speech, or some people choose to hit their child. I'm not saying that we do one thing or the other, but you're right that
we haven't been based enough in this stream. I'm going to say spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah, well, without going into specifics, I've noticed that our daughter pays much more attention when my husband is issuing a corrective order. Stop that, go over here, whatever, put that down. She will listen to him, and it could just be because he has a deeper voice and because he's bigger, or it could be because he's a little bit more harsh with her.
The thumb screws.
Well, this isn't a stream about punishment, but I think it's... I don't know how natural it is, but once you start paying attention to yourself, looking at your emotions objectively, it's called mindfulness, is the modern way of looking at it. And I do it so naturally now that I find it hard to remember or to believe that I couldn't do it before, but I believe I couldn't do it before, where if I was hungry or tired or just angry, I used to internalize it so that it would feel like part of the situation and not something that was happening in me. Now if I'm hungry, I'm acutely aware of the fact that that is influencing how I'm responding to things, how I am seeing things. Being hungry is a big deal for me. It's not such a big deal for men, and I know a lot of men are watching, but for me and a lot of other women, having like a low blood sugar it's a big deal. It can really influence your mood a lot.
Yeah, I've spoken to my mum about this as well. She says the same thing. I was quite interested to hear. Although I do note that fasting. Oh, let's make this a brief tangent because we've done enough of those. But it seems like most cultures throughout most of history have practiced fasting as a discipline, and a lot of people say in the modern world that to fast is to recontextualize food in your life, and I don't want to say this at you in particular, but like I've found that in my experience, like once you understand the way that hunger works, and I think stoicism is similar. Like you need to be able to separate yourself a bit from your body. Like we can so easily excuse our bad behavior by many things, but like one of them is, this physical circumstance.
Yeah, it's not an excuse.
Yeah.
It's just something that you should rectify. I think if you're hungry and it's making you grumpy, it's your moral imperative to get some food, and not like some junk, but something actually nourishing that's going to alleviate that situation, so that you can then think clearer.
Yes.
And it's the same thing with anger, where if you're feeling, that's what I was coming to. If you can recognize your own anger and rage and that tendency to you love your child. I don't even know exactly what it means when you say you love someone, because when you love someone, you don't love them all the time. When you're angry at someone, you don't feel the love anymore. You only feel the anger.
Yeah,
and the love has to come through as a choice, where you treat them in the right way. Put your anger to the side, try and get over it, and treat them as if you weren't angry, and try, think logically about what you should do, not what your anger is telling you to do.
I bet if you, in the moment that you thought you only felt pure anger, actually saw that loved one threatened, if their life was threatened, I think your true love would come forward. I think you would lose that momentary anger immediately. And so I somewhat disagree. I think an attitude of if you act out of anger in the moment, that is an expression of
That's self-indulgence, I think.
Self-indulgence, yeah. Rather than that you've genuinely lost that underlying attitude. That's just a temporary. I mean, okay, if you stab somebody, maybe that's a step further. Like at that point, you really want rid of them. But for most people, I think love is an enduring experience that can.
Well, yeah, maybe that's a subject for a stream. Is
Yeah.
is love a feeling or is it a way of being?
Yeah, because I think Disney's got a lot to answer for in this regard. We were all brought up with these movies that said like, oh, somebody's going along living their life and then they are struck by love, and then it is clearly the moral imperative to follow this like bolt out of the blue to its logical conclusion, regardless of what else is going on in the universe.
Have you seen, just quickly, George Recall Schmidt? I always think about this. He had quite a dark video. He does funny videos about films, but he did a quite dark video about, he just touched on the subject of love. And he goes like, being in love is good, isn't it? Well, what if you're in love with someone who's dead? What if you're in love with a child? What if you're in love with a child who's dead? It's absolutely, yeah, it's not always positive. Go on. I can't remember what you were saying.
No, I can't remember. Well, I kind of, again, I can start from Bible verses, assume they're true, and then go and work them out logically, which I feel like is a massive advantage to me. I feel like it's the cheat code in a lot of these conversations that I can like.
It is a shortcut.
Speed run to my opinion by just remembering a verse. But like we're told as an instruction to love in the Bible, and it can't be based on the Disney opinion of love.
It can't be a feeling in that case.
It's an instruction because we all think that feelings are outside of our control. So often in our culture, we talk about like a divorce happened because the two people fell out of love.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Which, as a kind of commonly accepted trope, is such a harmful thing.
That's falling out of love is probably the last thing that happens that was a problem, I think.
Yeah, it's a polite euphemism for the reality.
Well, it might be that the only thing that was holding together was that initial.
Yeah, if you've done nothing to build the relationship the entire time, you're both super lazy in the relationship, and it was just kind of stumbling along out of the initial.
I think that in particular is also reinforced just by the easiness of divorce and the sort of like just get married, and if you don't like it, you can drop it.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like it's a vicious circle.
Yeah,
where
yeah. The marriage is then justified by the feeling of love, when really the marriage is an obligation that you fulfill regardless of the love. Whether it's there or not. We're in love. I just want to say that. I don't want to make it sound like we're in a loveless marriage. Did you have any thoughts on parenting? Just because you're also the parent and you'd be able to witness. Someone has asked what your favourite activity with the child is.
Giving them tickles.
Quite
Quite cute in the morning when they're like, when she's bubbling around. It's nice taking to the park.
Yeah.
It's the only time you can. It's like there's a period in your life when you go to the park and it's fun, and then there's a period in your life where you can't go to the park anymore. It's just there.
So
it's kind of fun.
You're glad to return to the park.
Well, it's like
it's like watching someone play Dark Souls.
Yeah, it's exactly that. Like having a child is, Jordan says it as well. So I'm not saying anything new, but it is sort of like you get to vicariously enjoy the world again through your child enjoying it. Like just the fact that she is impressed by cars and stones and like
dogs.
Yeah, and everything is like it does constantly remind you about the world, and you don't you lose somewhat of that sort of like everything you've seen everything kind of feel, because like she's so amazed by everything. You're very good with her, I think. Although it's funny how you are the more authoritarian parent, but she still loves you and she still plays with you. She can you both completely forget that 5 minutes ago you were telling her off and she was crying. She can stop crying immediately. Like the rapidity with which she forgets her feelings is amazing, because she doesn't sulk. She hasn't got to that age yet.
where being upset is like, you know, if I get upset about something, that's like hours. That's like hours of my evening gone.
Yeah.
But for her, it's like you just have to distract her with something, and she'll forget that she was crying
Just
a second
turn
ago.
to say dog.
Yeah, there'll be tears on her face, and she'll be thinking about something else. But there's the same thing with your relationship with her, where she will, you know, you'll be friends again very quickly, even though you are making her cry. I'm not saying that you're mean for doing that, because it obviously works.
Yeah, who knows? Like, it's hard to know in that case, like, if she's actually.
But she remembers it because she doesn't do it next time.
Yeah, I mean, but like, how upset? Like, what does it mean for a baby to cry? Like, it's not like, are they really as upset as they seem to be, or are they just displaying
Because it's
an emotion to
Or
signal?
do babies reveal how upset we really are when we're repressing our emotions? Maybe babies are the ones who are honest in this
Yeah,
situation.
I don't know, but like, it's one of the things I think about is like, how upset, can she fake on any level how upset she is? I mean, she doesn't do fake crying. She's like, there's definitely like when she's like whacked herself into the wall, like there's a completely different cry to when she's just like, it can be the same volume, but when she's just like, when you tell her to sit down,
stubbornness.
She will like, she'll still make a loud upset cry and tears will come out of her eyes when she like falls over and like hits her head or something, and it's like she's got a scratch. To just telling her not to do something, or like make it like try and pick her up or take her somewhere. Like she's clearly displaying a different kind of cry. So internally she must be experiencing something differently.
I was very impressed with her recently when she didn't cry, but she had this little frown on her face, like she was really upset, but she was keeping it in. Which I guess it sounds really harsh, like I'm training her to keep her emotions inside, but I was so proud that that's what growing up is, you know, you feel something and you don't express it. And you don't feel it as much then as a result. When you don't have to express it, you then can get past it quite quickly. And the fact that she was able to do that really impressed me. Like she's growing. She was just, sad on the inside, trying to break through it. But I guess probably people who aren't parents aren't very interested in the baby talk.
But I think it's interesting because we were all babies once. We developed out of being babies. How did we get here?
You can't remember that bit of your life, but it's probably one of the most important things that ever happened to you.
I'm always fascinated when there's that moment when a baby, or probably a toddler at this point, has like fallen over or something, and they look around for adults, and based on the adult's reaction, they might be completely, they just move on, or they could be bawling with crying. Do you know what I mean? Like, if the adult reacts in a concerned way, that almost like they contextualize the events that happened to them. They almost are like learning the reaction that they ought to have. Like, oh, when I fall over, is it a big deal or not? Should I? Is this an important event? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't know if she's doing that, but it does sometimes seem that after she'll have a tumble, fall over, and then she freezes, and then you're just waiting for her to. Sometimes she laughs, and sometimes she's like just whines, and sometimes she just like starts picking up dirt on the floor.
And people are obsessed these days with validating each other's feelings. I think that's a really interesting phrase. I actually think so. There's a big talking point in sort of the MGTOW type crowds of like, oh, it's so terrible that men are taught to repress their feelings, and on the other hand, feminists say the exact same thing, right? Yeah. Men should be taught to express their emotions. I actually think part of being mature is the ability to repress your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a positive.
It's context dependent, I think. So it's not one thing or the other, I think. Certainly, as we were talking about with rage, an action taken with rage is almost all, unless you're literally in a battle.
Yeah.
Any action taken out of rage is probably a bad idea, and
I don't even know. I think all these like emotions, this 7 sins, 7 whatever it is,
Vices.
virtues.
Yeah.
I think all of them are good, and some of them bad. Like don't be like light and centrist or whatever, but you need like there's a reason why we have rage, and there's a reason why we have like gluttony and lust. Like they all serve a function in certain contexts. I think the ones that we generally consider to be sins are the ones that just tend to be most obviously pathological and over. Yeah, they're the ones that when you have an excess of them, they're obvious and they're obviously bad. But I think like any of these things, all of these things serve a function in certain contexts, and they're all necessary in a functioning human being. I mean, kind of, it'd be ridiculous if they weren't. Like, why would we have these things if they've never sort of served any function? And I think, depression, there's almost certainly it probably serves a function.
But by the logic that these behaviours exist and therefore they're not bad, you could just justify anything.
I wouldn't say they're not. I wouldn't say like it's not bad. They're not bad, but I'm saying it's like dose, like toxic.
Too much
Nothing is toxic. Toxic is a function of dose.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's perfectly healthy to be. It's if you took somebody and made them unable to have rage, like that person would not really feel human. If you took all those things and said like just strip them out of a human, then that human would not really be a human being. Like they couldn't experience those things. Like rage is important. Like, if you want to get something done, it's very motivational.
If you want to break your teacup.
Maybe rage is just the name we give to motivation when it's undirected and sort of...
When it's at a low dose. I mean, when it's at a high dose.
At a high dose and it's undirected towards a constructive goal.
Yeah,
I just want to, when you see it when like monkeys and stuff like that, it's there, like when you try, it's designed to be like, when they're trying to get something, when you're trying to do something,
do it more.
And it's not working.
Just
it's like a random walk. It's what I'm doing isn't working. Your brain is just telling you to sort of like, okay, nothing that you're doing is working, so let's just hit it and like get angry and either hurt yourself and maybe you'll shut down.
I don't know. I think a loss of self-control is never a useful thing. But I think the behaviours that you're talking about are directed in the right places. So if you were... so suppose you saw some violent act happening and you were in a position to like stop them. You want rage in that situation to make you fly into like...
It gives you bravery, or maybe it makes you reckless, but you need to be reckless at that moment.
The same thing, lust, right? Lust could make somebody do something awful in the wrong situation, but sexual attraction is actually really valuable for keeping marriage together. So the same like... then you're just stuck. What's the rings on?
It's a huge part of like... I think these labels we give to like we have these negative labels for these things. That's just we're like labeling the end of the spectrum, and then the idea that like trying to strip it all the way down the spectrum, like it's like overcorrecting. To try and go like, we need to remove toxic masculinity. They push it far too far, or like try and remove that aspect completely. It's not possible to remove it, but
Okay, here's a question for you. Sorry, when you feel an emotion and you repress it, is that different to never experiencing the emotion, or is there something useful gained by feeling it but not acting on it?
The exercise of repression.
No, I mean, is the rage informative even if you don't act on it? Is it doing something useful if you remain calm as still water on the surface.
It's more virtuous, I think, to resist the temptation. So if there's two people, one of whom experiences that flash of anger and controls it, and the second person is just like an inert zombie who doesn't even notice it in the first place. The first person has achieved something more impressive, that they've controlled themselves in a more difficult situation. I don't know that I would justify it as being like the flash of anger is useful, maybe, but if the flash of anger was towards something bad, or maybe lust is a better example. Right? If you're at the beach and somebody walks past and they're like, you know, in a swimsuit, and you feel like a flash of lust towards them and repress it, that doesn't tell you anything useful. You're not like, oh, let me take a note of that. I guess I found that, but nonetheless, to me that is like an expression of your broken sinfulness, that you're having to deal with impulses that can't possibly have a useful expression. That could lead you astray.
Which book was it? You said like, if you can't experience emotions, you can't make decisions.
Was that Thinking Fast and Slow? Is that The Righteous Mind?
You told me, and I've read them both, but you said it, and I couldn't remember him saying it. But yeah, it's sort of like it definitely resonated with me. Right. That idea that if you had to intellectually think about approaching women, you'd probably
wouldn't bother.
But if you see,
the most misogynistic thing I've ever heard.
But the lust in there is like, I need to do this. Like, it shuts down your thinking and makes you go for it.
I think that's a good example, because the rage is kind of a harder one to think of the useful, the self-controlled man. It's like hot. But if you think about someone like James Bond, someone who's really good at talking to women, after what we presume was a inspiration of lust, he likes the woman. But instead of just, going after her like an ape, he's cool.
Right.
He's letting her know she's interested without being, crazy about it.
He acts as if he was cool and collected. But if you actually thought he didn't care about the women, it would be psychopathic.
Yeah, the woman wouldn't be interested in him if she thought that he, was gay or disinterested.
There's an interesting definition of the word meek. You might know the verse, "The meek shall inherit the earth." People generally think of meek as meaning like mild-mannered, quiet, ineffectual. Maybe even Jordan Peterson talks about this, but like I've certainly heard other people say meek means, like, the literal original word in Greek was like, you've got a sword, but it's in the sheath, as in you can be. So Jordan Peterson talks about the same idea, right? You're not. It's not impressive to be.
You're not harmless.
Harmless. I think that's the James Bond thing, isn't it? It's like effective, powerful, can do stuff.
Yeah, he kills people,
but he doesn't have this.
When he decides to kill somebody, he's willing to go all the way and kill that person. And it's the same with women. When he wants to, fuck a woman. He's gonna do it.
But there's some control in it.
Yeah, he doesn't rape them. That would be a different James Bond.
Why people these days will say he does, probably, but the reason we are impressed by James Bond and to some extent look up to him, and everyone wants, like, especially men want to be him, is because he's an expression of like masculinity in a positive sense of like what.
He has
lots of what he does is probably not
over his emotions, but he can still achieve. He achieves what men want to do, and he has those emotions that men have. But he has achieved. He's achieved like a synthesis between his intellectual talents and his emotional wants, so that he gets what he wants. He can make decisions about what he wants, but he can control exactly. He's like a surgical instrument about how to do that thing, and he achieves it.
Yeah, he's
competent at the things he wants to achieve, but he has enough emotions to have wants to achieve things.
There was one other just to go back to circle round to the original topic we were talking about on sort of swearing. I wanted to at least briefly touch on why is it that there's all these different things, like swearing an oath, cursing is like saying you're gonna like suffer some like weird consequence, and then saying things that are shocking, just words. Like why do we have kind of like the same language?
Even the word cussing is it comes from the word cursing.
Yeah.
So yeah, cursing and like as I said in your live stream in Treasure Island, they refer to swearing, not like promising, but swearing as we've been talking about it today. They refer to it as oathing, which I thought was odd when I was reading it, but I quickly figured out that they meant swearing, which is the same thing. Both of those words mean to promise. To say, often people say, by God, I guess it starts off as a promise, like, by God it will be done, or like, I swear it on God. People say things like, I swear it on my life. That sense of the word swear.
So I wanted to talk about swearing as an intensifier. People will use a word to add emphasis to what they're saying. Like, they won't just say, that was great. They'll say that was bleeping great and put in whatever word as an intensifier. So there's another bit of the Bible that talks about let your yes be yes and your no be no, actually saying we shouldn't swear, even in the sense of like swearing on something sacred. Whereas in like, I think in America, I think in England as well, maybe you swear an oath when you're going to testify. You say like
on the Bible or a different holy book.
Yeah. So I just wondered what you thought about this behaviour, and my general contention is we should mean what we say without having to justify it.
Yeah.
And I also have trouble and I've been guilty of this, adding into your speech pattern phrases like to be honest, because the implication is you're usually dishonest. But just pay attention to this one occasion.
Yeah. It's a good point. I think you're right. I see what you mean. Where if you say like, I don't know why I'm saying this. Like, if you get up from your seat right now, I won't take your seat.
Yeah.
Even though I like that seat.
Yeah.
I won't take it.
Yeah.
I promise. It's like, what? If you didn't promise, what are you going to do it?
Before you said I promise, I just completely disregarded what you're saying.
It kind of implies that I'm the kind of person who would do it. But now that I've promised, I definitely won't do it. But I might have otherwise.
Yes.
So that's what I take as like, let your yes be your yes. And yet there is definitely a place, I think, for marriage ceremonies, for making a very solemn promise.
Yeah.
In front of lots of people, and the same thing for testifying in court. When someone's reputation is on the line, you want to make sure that what you're saying is you're not flippantly using colourful language or exaggerating. But then you shouldn't be doing those things anyway. I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
But I think it's too high standard.
It is too high a standard, I think.
Like everyone knows that people like lie all the time. I mean, not all the time, but like it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. But yeah, those occasions is when it's going to like, okay, there's a ceremonial aspect to it to say that, okay, yeah, it's kind of on it. Yeah, I know it's like a meta that it's honest, I guess. That it's honest in that it's admitting that usually you're not as honest as you need to be in this situation. Like this is kind of like, okay, and we know in usual life you lie a bit, but now we're entering like this is a veil of.
But even if you don't lie, even if you're what I assume is a very upstanding, very careful in your speech, man, like Lambda here,
Peterson, yes.
Yeah. Even so, you can't pay that much attention to what you're saying all the time because it would take you too long to speak. So there is always the risk of exaggeration, of being too vague. You can't be specific about everything you're saying. You go, it was about noon. I'm not going to spend the energy trying to remember if it was 1:15 or 11:15. The way that you might if you were doing it in court.
Yes, I agree that when you're wanting to emphasize that what you've said has been through multiple loops of your brain,
You're sure of what you're saying.
you've really put attention into it. You need a way to call that out. So I suppose then maybe what I'm complaining about, although we said we weren't going to, we didn't approve of complaining. Maybe, let me rephrase that. What I'm drawing attention to as a possibly problematic behaviour, dear listeners, is if you are putting a truth emphasis every time you speak, which is what you see when people are endlessly using swear words, just as an emphasis. I would say that's the most common use of swear words if people keep throwing them around, right? It's as an emphasis. Maybe that's not true.
I was trying to think of my favourite use of swear words in film, because
Yeah.
swear words obviously have a comedic purpose, so I was thinking of the funniest use of swear words, and I remembered the bit in Blues Brothers where the guy, I don't want to explain the whole scene, but someone is trying to be intimidating, and he says, "You're going to look really funny eating corn on the cob with no fucking teeth."
Right.
And I don't think that line works if he doesn't say fucking.
Interesting.
You're going to look really funny eating corn on the cob with no teeth. And it's all in the delivery, it's all in the
effing teeth.
No friggin' teeth.
Yes. So it needs maybe just in the pattern of it, it needs an extra beat. But if it was no da da da, if there was a 3-syllable word, it probably still wouldn't have the same punch.
In the delivery, the fucking is the escalation, because you're going to look real funny.
And he's saying
it's not necessarily an aggressive thing to say.
Yeah.
And he says it with quite
and then as soon as he says fuck it, he goes like, fuck it, yeah, no fucking teeth.
Yeah.
It's suddenly that's why it's funny, because it's going like, you're going to look funny. Oh, funny. I like that.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. I agree. I see what you're saying, and I think you said this before, that like there are some cases where humour is increased by swearing. I can't deny that. I think that's another, in my opinion, that's another case of like, if you habituate swearing for the benefit of comedy, you're making your life more difficult in other ways. But yeah, as I say, I don't expect everybody to reach my super high standards.
So that was interrupting you there, because you were saying that the to add a swear word is usually used for emphasis. So I was just giving you an example of that. But did you have a point after that?
Oh well, I was driving towards that. If you are using it to emphasize all the time, that power again gets sapped. So if you wanted to make people pay attention because you were using the swear word to emphasize you're really being serious, this is kind of within the worldview that I was going to use swear words to make a point, which I don't know that I would anyway. But it's just, I suppose this is my main thesis for the evening, is like, we should try to map our beliefs onto our language. So if something is, in your opinion, the most horrific thing, you should use the most horrific word to describe that thing. If something is the most important, you should try to preserve the words that you use to signify importance, only for when you're talking about that thing. And if you think something is relatively mild language, we should have a celebration of mild expressions of things, like using the smaller words, even though they're not as exciting. But you don't have to. It's a bit of a boring cause to get by, isn't it?
I think I can appreciate that, and as we talked about, I'm very sympathetic to the idea that words are magic. And something I wrote down actually that I was going to mention is that I think almost as much as our face and our reputation, or our clothes, our words define us perhaps more than anything, and not just the words that we choose, but the tone of our voice, the accent. There's so much of people's opinions are formed on the way you speak, the things you say, and the words you say them with, and all of that. And I think that cannot be taken too lightly. That your words are you to an extent. That is, in other people's minds, you are what you say.
Yeah.
The words coming out of your mouth are what are defining you.
Yeah. And you said previously, you can't stop and think before everything you say. I don't know if that's true.
Maybe we should.
Maybe we should. I mean, we've just,
but then it becomes a bit painful.
we've been talking non-stop for hours, so yes, this stream would have been a lot worse if we'd have all, like, 5 minutes to consider our sentence.
Yeah, that's one of the slouching towards Gethsemane, like, or the centre cannot hold, but in the best lacked all conviction, well, the worst. What was it?
Sorry.
The worst speak with passionate intensity, and the best lack all conviction.
Ooh.
Yeah, like by definition, like people that are bad
Yeah.
are going to have these bad habits of just saying it, lying,
Vouch.
throwing out things. And
Sorry, I'm gossiping now.
Versus the good people that consider all their words and try and caveat things and try and speak the truth. Like, you're just going to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, people will listen to the people that are certain.
Yeah, I think there's always we could talk about tactics, but I think there is a sense in which there's a short-term gain and a long-term gain. It's kind of like the nice guys finish last sort of philosophy that's like, it's true in a sense, but also it's not, where you might get, Vouch is extremely popular. He's more popular than me on YouTube, at least. But I take my audience over Vouch's. Even with the size difference, I'm often extremely impressed by the caliber of people who are in my audience. When I, watch their own YouTube channels, Oren McIntyre.
Yeah.
People who have their own channels, I find that they've been watching me for years, and like, these are really smart people, and I don't think that they would be watching me if I was saying everything I'm saying, but saying it like Vouch says it. And he has more numbers, and maybe he's winning the culture war, but I don't think he can win it forever.
Pretty smart. Do you think it'll outsmart this bullet?
We'll have to ask Oren if he watches Vouch to verify this conclusion. How many people in chat watch Vouch? This could ruin your entire thesis.
It's true. If they're all watching Vouch and they're just here because he's not streaming at the moment.
Yeah, Povey Vouch Flame War begins now.
Do you have a favourite swear or like that Blues Brothers line? Is there any good line that comes to mind that you like? I won't ask you because I know you don't like to verbatim repeat swear words.
No, I probably would if it was really worth it.
I think there's a funny bit in the start of Where the Gun. It's a very famous bit with like Sarah Silverman. It's got this kind of.
I don't remember it. Sorry.
Where is it? It's kind of like interesting to listen to the commentary as well, because it's there's two main characters sitting like this on this guy's car, and they're just like they're just sitting there and this shrill woman comes up and says like, "What are you doing sitting on the thing's car? Yeah, like you could have, well, yeah." She's like, it's absolutely like a huge stream of like heck, thing, just like saying that just a small dick, like this torrent of like swear words and torrent of abuse on him, and she says like, "My boyfriend's gonna beat you up," and like you get like, okay, she talks a lot of shit, but I'm gonna kick the shit out of you, and then the two guys stand up, they look at each other like that, and then you just punch the woman, they beat up the woman. In the commentary said like, that's in the situation where you're outnumbered, beat up the woman, because then you've won. Because whatever happens, that guy's going to have to sit in ER for the next like 6 hours with his wife. Even if you're going to get beaten up anyway. If you fight the guy, you're going to get beaten up, and you're going to lose. But if you fight the woman, you're still going to get beaten up, but they can't beat you up that much, and he's lost.
That's a strange way to take this.
Yours has more of a zinger feel.
Well, it's in the movie they don't explain that.
Yeah.
It's just they're just standing up and you're expecting there's going to be a fight between these two guys, and it's a bit like the Indiana Jones moment where he shoots him. You think like, oh, it's setting up that these two guys are going to fight this like crowd.
right.
This guy like get ready to fight, and they just look at each other and they just beat her up
Beat up the woman.
because she started the fight as well.
That's what we. Fair enough.
To add another one, even though I already had one.
You can have mine.
My version of your opinion. We watched Heathers recently.
Yeah.
And I love the line in Heathers where it's near the end. It's not the main Heather. It's one of the other Heathers. She's getting into a fight with an argument with the main character, and she's she's saying like, "Why are you getting at me?" She goes, "Why are you pulling on my dick?" It's a very funny thing for a teenage girl to say. She doesn't like say it like a joke. She's saying sincerely, like, "Get off my back!" Like, "Why are you pulling on my dick?" Which is just a funny visual image, but it's funny that she's saying it.
I do enjoy in comedy songs when there's very clearly set up. You have a rhyming scheme, and the first line ends with a word, and then the second line has a meaning that clearly can end with a word that rhymes with the first word and is a swear word, and then you say something different. That I have to admit, there's no way of replicating that humour without having
the swear.
The swear. You don't even say the swear, and this causes me a problem because then I'm like, is this a way for me to harness the comedic power of swearing, which I've been missing out for my whole life, without subverting my own rule against swearing? And I think I probably...
But you've put the swear in their head.
Yeah, so I think it's probably still not allowed within my own better rules. But I also want to say, I was brought up not swearing, which gives me a colossal advantage in this kind of self-control battle that I've kind of... You know, this
you didn't
thing
get
of,
into the habit.
A streak, like when you've got a behaviour that's like, I've managed it so long, I'm going to keep going because... So I reckon if I broke the streak and was known as somebody who just swore frequently for a year and then tried to go back, it would be much more difficult. So, I think, I just thought that was an interesting side point that, like, I don't I do alright at keeping to my rules. I don't consider other people who swear like lesser in any way than me for their behaviour. I don't think it's...
I think it's okay if you do.
It's an asymmetric situation where
it's not a standard you apply to other people.
Yeah, I don't... I think I... Do I want to retract it? Maybe I do. I think it's a more important point. Of all the things in the universe, right, of all the moral infractions people can commit, swearing is like one of the smallest. I want to say, although I've sounded probably quite passionate about this evening, like, I think this is an area that I do pretty well on by my own metrics. But it's also like way less important than other things that if people can control their swearing, I think it helps breed self-control, which can cross over into other areas. But it also sets up expectations about it. So I think when people get to know me, and they will eventually kind of subconsciously notice, like, he doesn't swear, that will probably bring expectations of how I live the rest of my life. If I didn't swear, but then was doing all kinds of other morally horrible things, that's almost worse, right? Because you're compounding hypocrisy of thinking that you're like this morally upright person because you're so careful with your language, and then you're also a horrible person. So people ought to strive to be consistent. So the message they're sending to people is, if you come across as a wholesome person, I think this is why it's so particularly galling when you hear about, like, I don't know, Catholic priests doing horrible things. Because, yes, okay, it's horrible when people do horrible things, but also this is somebody who's, like, projecting to the world that they're a beacon of morality, and then they also are doing horrible things. So like,
Yeah.
I think people who don't swear are expressing something broader to the world, that they like think their actions matter and they're thoughtful people. And I don't know that I always keep to that high standard with the rest of my behaviour, but I like at least I strive for it. So maybe that's just a slightly separate point. Is generally the moral fibre of the whole society can be improved if everybody agrees together. We're going to be like well behaved. We're going to, versus the opposite, which is like we're a rebel group who are going to do shocking things. And if you think of groups historically who've sworn more than average, they also are often doing other heinous things.
I think you've hit on something key there, which is that I don't think it's correlated in a causal way, but I think it's related in a it's like a signpost. It's a flag,
yes,
perhaps.
Yeah.
A warning flag where this person cannot control the words coming out of their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
They probably don't have a lot of self-control otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
If they did, they might be exercising it a bit better now.
They say dress for the job that you want. I wonder if you should dress your speech for the type of person that you want to be.
I think that's a really good takeaway. Yeah, and that goes for everything else we talked about, like complaining and gossiping. I think.
Yeah.
And disparaging other YouTubers whose audience you don't like.
Sorry, Vash.
Yeah, that's a good place to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on once again. Great. Tomorrow night,
yeah,
Bible
tomorrow
study.
Night.
What's going to be the subject?
I should have announced this up front. I've got Radlib on.
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually only him tomorrow. He has told me about this really awesome translation of the first 5 books of the Bible.
It's called the Torah.
It's called the Torah. Yeah, the first 5 books are called the Torah, the books of Moses, which are in Hebrew, and of course, most of us don't speak Hebrew, so you end up reading a translation. And this particular translation is very interesting. It retains a lot of the kind of earthiness of the original text, so that's quite exciting. And in particular, we're thinking about how maybe, this is Radlib's theory, or not his theory, but what he wants to talk about, the way that those books express themselves is as a contrast or a reaction to some of the other religions that were around at the time that Moses was writing. So like, for example, the Egyptian religions. So he says, okay, the Egyptian gods were this, that, and the other. Now, when you go and read bits of Exodus or bits of Genesis, and you think, it's saying God isn't like that Egyptian god in this way, and that as an interpretive lens. Sorry, it's a really complicated topic to explain.
No, I get, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, there you go. So come and, I mean, if nothing else, come and listen to Radlib. He's always interesting and worth listening to. So I'm very excited.
A very wholesome man.
Yes, we all aspire to be Radlib in one sense or another.
Yeah, yeah, good point. And thank you very much to my husband for turning up and for letting out the living room, which is our own. During the evenings, this is really our only space. There's no other rooms in this house because the baby's sleeping upstairs.
Bathroom.
There's a bathroom, but that's not much of an entertainment space. So it's for us to do a live.
One person.
You can all look at your phone in the toilet. Yeah. For you to give us the room for the evening is a very good gift that I'm sure everyone watching appreciates.
A condemned man would appreciate it.
When you were thinking about living on the edge of a cliff, was that quite an attractive option at some point?
It's every day to me.